Oklahoma versus UTEP, and I have seen it all over Twitter, but people are apologizing to UTEP for what's going to happen to them on Saturday starting at 2:30. And don't get me wrong, I am going to be pumped sitting in section 35 this year. It's a new section for me, as I previously was sitting in section 36, but we moved over for my mom to try to get up underneath some shade underneath the upper deck. So hopefully those are good seats, and I'm just excited to be in the Palace cheering on the Sooners, as many of you all are as well. But let's go ahead and let's talk about this game and just what I am expecting to see from my Sooners going into the season, with the first game being UTEP. And I've said it many times before, whether it's on an interview with a player, I think I said it with Jaden Knowles, or just on other people's podcasts, and it is the importance and the history that UTEP has of playing Oklahoma. Whether that's being the 2000 national championship season and us opening the season against UTEP, or it being Lincoln Riley's first game as a head coach, and now being Brent Venables' first game as a head coach. UTEP has just been on the wrong end of the receiving trail for Oklahoma when it comes to playing us. But I guess that's good news for us, because it gives us an opportunity to play competition that necessarily isn't bottom of the totem pole, but also isn't the greatest, right? So it gives us an easy win, but it also gives our players an ability to go out there and play against talent that is going to actually make them play hard, not a Western Carolina. No offense, Western Carolina, but you guys didn't give the Sooners any trouble last year after they struggled with Tulane. And so I know the question has been floated around. Are the Sooners going to struggle this year like they did with Tulane last year? And the answer is simply no. And why is that? And I think the reasoning is because there is a culture change in Norman, Oklahoma from the previous staff to the new staff. And this is not bashing Lincoln Riley time or Alex Grinch at all. This is purely stating that there is a different culture in terms of these guys are ready to run through a brick wall for Brent Venables and this staff, and their strength and conditioning between the two staffs are 100% and completely different. I just got off of Ty's stream with Around the Table Sports, and if you guys haven't went over to his channel and listened to it, you totally need to go over there and listen to it. He provides great content and breakdowns for OU football and many other teams as well. But one of the things that we just talked about was how the defense really changed when Smitty left the team. And so I expect this year for the defense to be tremendously different this year, just for Schmitty being back in and of itself. One of the things that I expect most out of this game and what I want to see is, how does the defense play, and are they able to go out there and make those tackles that necessarily in the past that they haven't been able to make? I know a lot of people this past week were really talking up UTEP's quarterback, and yes, like, he did look okay. He threw 21 for 48 for 293 yards and 1 touchdown. So yeah, he might be able to sling it. They had a receiver that caught 7 receptions for 127 yards and 1 touchdown. I want to see how the secondary reacts to that passing game that UTEP has, because that's been a concern for Oklahoma for years. And I'm curious to see, are they able to go out there and play at a high level with some of the best receivers on these teams? That's not necessarily something we've been able to do in the past. So we get beat or whatever it looks like. And I think we're going to have a great opportunity to do that this week against UTEP with I think it's Hardison is his name, throwing over to Smith. There's going to be a lot of those passes, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for potentially Bowman or anybody else to be able to go pick that up and try to defend that. But again, I talked about it. Tackling. It's really important that, these players are able to go up and just wrap them and bring them down and not necessarily go for the turnover. Turnovers are exciting, and I love them just as much as the next person. But being able to wrap the person up and bring them down to the ground is just as equally important as it is to being able to cause a fumble. And so I think it's important to watch and see how this defense develops under a Brent Venables scheme, knowing we're not going to see a top 5 or top 10 defense this year. I think that's unlikely. I think that standard is too high. But to see a top 25 or top 30 defense this year, I think is definitely on the table. And I think OU fans need to look at that and go, that is an improvement, and that is something that we should be happy with. And so right now, the line is set at minus 31.5 in OU's favor. The over-under for this game is set at 57. I think it's a little low. I think OU's probably going to I think the over-under for this game should probably be 60, maybe 70 points. I think OU probably could put up 55 or 60 themselves, but 55 or 62 points themselves, with UTEP maybe getting a score or something maybe in garbage time. And so realistically, OU's going to come out. They're going to run through a brick wall in this first game. UTEP's going to get slaughtered. There are little things that we want to watch for, though, and it is all on the defense. I think we know what we should expect from our offense. Yes, did we lose a lot at the quarterback position? We did. Did we lose Kennedy Brooks? Yes, we did. But that running back room has a lot of depth. It has Eric Gray and Marcus Major coming back. Not to mention, we have Tawi Walker, who is a JUCO running quarterback, which we had him on the podcast. So if you haven't listened to that interview, go ahead and go listen to it. But then you've got other freshman running backs in that room, whether it's Gavin Sawchuk or Freeman. I think there's a lot of opportunity at this running back position, and it is pretty deep. Additionally, at the wide receiver, you have a lot returning, whether it's in Theo Weiss, you have Farouk, you have Drake Stoops, you have Mims, you have Braden Willis. I think when it comes to the offense, we know what we're getting. I want to know what we're getting from the defense. So, Sooner fans, take a step back. If it's not exactly what you expect, it's okay. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and we'll kind of dive into the depth chart with this statement. If you do not see your freshman that you really like on the depth chart or playing at all this season, it is okay. Because these freshmen really need to be able to sit down and develop. They need to build up their bodies to be ready to go out there and play at the college level. Very few times do you see a recruit come out of high school and they actually be ready to play at the college level and their bodies be built for it. And then additionally, to be able to, on the defensive side, to be able to come in and play in Brent Venables' scheme, I say on the defense side, Jeff Levy as well. To be able to come in and play in either of these two schemes is hard. And so it's great for these guys to be able to sit down and watch. Now, are they going to get minutes in garbage time? Yes. And I think that's important too. And you're going to see the freshmen up and down that depth chart going to get opportunities there. But it's equally important for them to be able to sit back and learn from those experienced guys that are out there on the field. And so there are some notable people that I think are left off the depth chart. But again, it's not necessarily the end of the world. The first one being Gavin Sawchuk, not being at the running back position. You guys have heard me ask it on the Twitter Spaces with Brandon Drum and Parker Thune, and Parker even kind of roasted me on it when I had him on for that breakdown for the Oklahoma season. But Gavin Sawchuk is a dude that in Norman everybody likes and has speed, right? It's okay if he's not there. He came in a little late this year. Maybe a little bit later than everybody. Normally, would it be on time? Yes. But with the new early enrollees, it was a little late. I think we'll probably see him later in the season. But you know what? It's okay that he's not on the depth chart right now. And you never know. Some of these guys could be recovering from injuries, small injuries. I think one of the most interesting things is seeing Marvin Mims go down to the slot, where you now have Drake Stoops at the number 2 and Marvin Mims at that starting position, because that is a position where Drake Stoops has excelled. Now, maybe we see Marvin Mims go back to the outside and Drake Stoops come into the slot maybe later in the season, or maybe even in some of those red zone situations. But I thought that was interesting that Marvin Mims was starting in the slot. Additionally, it kind of concerns me a little bit looking at how the depth at that right tackle position is only down to 2 players, at Wanye Morris and Jacob Sexton. Now, I've heard good things about Jacob Sexton, but you only have 2 guys there. And then you have a senior in Wanye Morris, and then you have a freshman in Jacob Sexton. So if Wanye Morris goes down, you now have Jacob Sexton as a freshman having to step in, and I think that could be a little concerning. So I'm curious to see how that right tackle position develops and how Jacob Sexton develops at that position as well. Another position that I am going to be closely watching throughout the season is the kicker position. What are we going to get there at that position? I know we had Zach Schmidt last year, and I think he kicked 1 or 2 field goals last year, and Gavin Marshall is a freshman. But I'm curious to see what we're going to get out of this position. Who's going to win that position? Are any of these kickers going to be able to go kick 50, 55-yard bombs like Burkich or some of those other guys in the past have been able to do? People forget how crucial that kicking role is, because in Lincoln Riley's offense, we scored touchdowns so frequently that maybe we didn't have to kick a bunch of field goals from 20, 30, 40, 50 yards out up until last season. So I think that's potentially a position that is going to maybe cause problems for Oklahoma. I don't know. Maybe it's a position that we don't need to worry about, but it's definitely going to be something that I'm watching. Additionally, it's curious that Billy Bowman is going to be on the kick return team, but not on the punt return team. I would have expected to see Billy Bowman with that speed and that athleticism to be on the punt return team, but instead we have Marvin Mims, Eric Gray, and Bunkley Shelton going to be returning punts. Also, another thing that stuck out to me was at the defensive tackle position, you had Jalen Redmond not starting. Now, I believe I heard something from somebody in one of the YouTube comments that he was recovering from a concussion. I do not know if that's true or not. And if that is, we hope and pray for a safe recovery, and we hope that he's able to get back on the field soon. But that's interesting to me that if he is healthy, that he is not starting at the defensive tackle position and that it is Jordan Kelly. Now, I have heard good things about Jordan Kelly, and that he has developed really well under Brent Venables. But Jalen Redmond has been a guy that has came in and immediately had a lot of pressure and maybe had a lot of high expectations. And so I'll be curious to see how he is able to develop throughout the season and if we see him take over a starting role. Additionally, it's that cheetah position, right? So Deshaun White has came out as the starting cheetah, and he's not a guy that we heard a lot about at that starting cheetah position. And so Justin Harrington is right behind him as a senior. And so I'll be curious to see if Justin Harrington throughout the season can go and take over that position. Billy Bowman starting at strong safety. I think we expected that. You've also got Keen Lawrence out there, and you got Woody Washington. I think we expected all of those. I am not necessarily too shocked there. One more player that I think everybody should be watching is the breakout season for Jaden Gibson, who is a freshman. Now, I did say that freshman might not get to see the field a whole lot. However, with Jaden Gibson, I think that is going to be the the exception, because Jaden Gibson is tall and he's really athletic. And I think that is going to be a guy that you are going to be able to utilize a lot, especially when you're matched up with smaller secondary players. So earlier, Oklahoma did announce their starting captains, and that is Deshaun White, Braden Willis, Dylan Gabriel, David Agwebu, and Justin Broyles. And this is interesting to me because there are 2 guys that are left off this list that I thought for sure would be on this list, and that is Ethan Downs and Danny Stutzman. Now, that's not to say that they will not play leadership roles in the background of this team, but I thought that they might be captains for this team, and it turns out that they're not. Now, maybe next year they get the role with Deshaun White, maybe this being his last year and Justin Broyles being his last year. Maybe Brent Venables wanted to give them the opportunity to go out there and be a captain for this team and be leaders. I have no doubt in my mind that those guys are going to be able to go out there and exceptionally be able to lead the younger players and lead this team to victory. But it was interesting for me to be able to at least not see one of the 2 in Danny Stutzman or Ethan Downs on that list. You guys know it. We had Ethan Downs on the podcast. We also had Danny Stutzman. And Danny Stutzman wants to be a leader on this team. I expect we will see him take a leadership role off the field, leading that linebacker room with Kobe McKenzie and Jaron Kanak, especially where they might have to be utilized later in the season as people get hurt or injured, and TD Roof is already out. Additionally, I would expect to see TD Roof take more of a player coach role as he sits out the season and recovers from an injury. I wonder if this will be the start to a coaching role for him in his coaching career, or if he will return for one more season. TD Roof is extremely smart. He knows this defense, and he is going to be a great asset for the Sooners going into the season and maybe even a little bit further, as he is able to help some of those younger players like Kobe McKenzie and Jaron Kanak develop. And not even that, just Danny Stutzman. These guys are going to be able to come off the field, ask him questions about, hey, where should I be? What can I do better? And I think having something like that where you can ask your peer and have your peer be able to coach you up is so important. So that is it. That is my recap for Oklahoma versus UTEP. I am excited to be back in the Palace. If you are going to be in Norman, whether you're going to be tailgating or whether you're going to be at the game, let me know. I would love to meet some of you guys. And I am just excited to be back in the Palace, ready to watch some Sooner football, ready to hear the bells, ready to watch our scene setters for the year. Let me know what you guys are most excited for this upcoming season for the 2022 Oklahoma Sooners.